Greetings, sending you all some warm, positive vibrations. So, hopefully, everyone is keeping their thinking cap on and working to cultivate some discernment, especially at this time. It's a time of a lot of fear, and we're allowing ourselves, I could say, even understandably, to be manipulated by fear. So, six basic human fears. There are six, well, some would say six or more than six. There are six basic human fears: fear of poverty, interesting, fear of criticism, fear of ill health, fear of the loss of love or never finding love. There's fear of old age, and one of the biggest fears for humans is the fear of death. So, fear of poverty, criticism, ill health, loss of love, fear of old age, and fear of death. And uh, these fears, this is how we allow ourselves to be manipulated, often in ignorance. It's very easy for us to be triggered to get a response or to get humans and large groups of us to act out and place ourselves in harm's way or to follow people blindly due to the manipulation of these fears that are in our subconscious, deep in our subconscious, and pretty much drive most of our human behavior. So I sit and I reason that as, you know, it's a shame. I comprehend it's such a shame. It's such a shame, to watch the public and group and collective grooming, the grooming of a community. I mean, of mass populations. I mean, we see it with entertainers. Although he was extremely talented, and MJ was one. Um, RK is another one of current times, but we've had religious leaders. I just recently, within the last 2 days, saw or read an article. I think it was on the BBC. It's sometimes you wonder if this stuff is real. Of a pope admitting to the to a lot of the women and the religious sect being used for certain purposes as, you know, pretty much as ex slaves, ex slaves. I'll say it like that. So when you have these kind of admissions by the higher up leaders, uh, the spiritual leaders of religions, it's to a point where it's openly stated and admitted. Wow, where are we? So do we continuously put our faith in leaders more than our common sense, pretending to see or pretending to not see what we see? And as I've observed, many, many, many of mass populations, many of us will prefer the cult. Many of us will prefer the cult or cults over personal responsibility. The personal responsibility, the weight of making um, decisions, the weight of really accepting the consequences for choices made in ignorance, or maybe even dealing with certain things that have been put upon us, rather than really mentally process that discomfort. Many will choose the cult or cults. Many of us will choose to be led over personal responsibility, which is actually, it's quite amazing when you really sit back and you think of it. Many of us will prefer the cult for a sense of belonging to something. And many of us, especially right now, but there have been things to fear forever throughout human history, but many will prefer the cult to, or cults to soothe fear, So that part of our psyche that wants a father figure, someone just to soothe. This is all very primal behavior. So that's why it's extremely advantageous for predators or companies to invest so much in understanding the human psyche, right? Because if someone invests more time and energy in understanding our psyche than us, then that's that it has proven itself very advantageous, right? So with these six basic fears, what can we do? Because this channel is not just to sit and rant about my experience. How can what I experience and what others have experienced, by the way, you're invited to educate yourself, to take the time to educate yourself so that you can see patterns, because these patterns of human behavior that we see in cults, religious cults, political cults, um, all different types of cults, they run rampant. It's a mentality, and there's some distinct patterns. So educating yourself is one of the best things that we can do, because many um, are taken advantage of by cults because of a lack of a frame of reference, right? When they sound good, something may be off, but folks sometimes can't make the distinction of what exactly is off, and may not understand the patterns. And con men are con men for a reason. Many of us may not realize that we've been conned, or many of us may not have experienced a con man up close and personal, but they're called con artists for a reason. And what are some things that young people or anyone can do to keep our critical thinking up, and to actually protect ourselves from predators? So these are some things. Perhaps I don't have all the answers. Each of us will have to deal with the repercussions of our decisions, whether we're nice people or not, whether we make decisions in ignorance or not. But something that we can do is, in our quiet moments, to identify our fear. Fear is one of the main things that allows us to be manipulated. And right now, with so much going on in the planet, folks are racking up dough and are gathering more followers due to fear, right? And people are just going to go to just appease their fear. So something that perhaps we can do is to identify our fear, to acknowledge that we have fear, um, to accept that fear is a signal for us to do something. So these might be quote unquote advanced concepts and not be on the radar for somebody 17, 18, 19, unless maybe they had a mature, safe, older adult to speak to that's not going to manipulate them. That's a huge distinction. Or an older person of wisdom. But now today it's unfortunate. We see so many people misusing their positions of eldership, right? And their life experience, knowing that younger people may not have a frame of reference, or that someone that is traumatized or going through a life crisis, the discernment, or somebody that may be sick, that their discernment is not all there because they're in a vulnerable position. But do understand that will be taken advantage of, and it is every day. But I'm identifying your fear, acknowledging your fears, accepting that fear is a signal to prepare for something. So, and this is a challenge when I think for many young people, maybe 18, 19, or young adults, we expect them to know everything because they reach a certain age. That's one of the reasons that people in their late teens, after 18 and up, the legal age, because con artists are well aware of the legal age of folks, which can be younger in other countries. They know that there are many young people, young adults that don't have any protective father or elder figures around them, and that have that question a lot that's going on in society, and that are looking for solutions. So without a frame of reference and with a listening ear, these folks, you're easily manipulated at 18, 19, 20, looking for answers, many looking for financial security. So it's so easy, and also at that age, at 18, 19, when we're legal age to in society, we're given the green light to drink and to smoke and to explore all the appetites that the older adults have. Um, it's a time ripe to make life altering decisions that could really take us off track from our goals, and compromise our mental and emotional health. Um, it's a time ripe to be manipulated, because folks know that you don't have anybody coming to look for you. And legally, um, if things happen in terms of you exposing yourself to people intimately, um, you will be held legally accountable as an adult, for your own self, whether you're a nice person or whether you're ignorant or not. So for a young person today a young adult to sit with their fears, I would say, looking back, that's kind of an advanced concept. If it's something that you haven't discussed with something else, I don't know that that's on our radar at 18 or 19. And preparing for adulthood and the challenges of adulthood right after you graduate from high school. That is definitely a catalyst. And the times that we're living, if we admit it, it's a time of a lot of fear for young people. And sometimes we just collapse mentally under the pressure to make certain decisions and fear. So maybe if adults could perhaps consider, we were young too, and with each generation, there's a lot that they have to consider, to hustle, to to provide for themselves, college, a lot of jobs and professions like photography. There's so many professions now that are computerized. So it's a lot for young adults to consider. And if they don't have mature adults, if they don't have stable support, it's easy to see why young adults can be so manipulated on all ends. So to accept that you have fear, to get ready to prepare yourself. At the same time, where young people, the hormones are raging, there's so many messages being pumped to just give way to appetites, almost basically screw yourself to death, which it's a lot of distraction between popular culture, music. There's a tremendous amount of distraction, so much competing for your attention. So where is that mature young adult that has the foresight? Where's that mature adult that is sitting down, acknowledging their fears and preparing for it? I mean, who is really that mature at 18 and 19, unless that's something that you've been exposed to get confident about what you can do about your fears. Again, hopefully, if that's something that's really chancy. I don't know that young adults are really that mature. I don't know that we should really expect that of many adults, because that's not what is being modeled in popular culture. So to get confident about what you can do about your fear, I would really say, I don't know if we consider that as more mature adults, that is an advanced concept for 18 and 19-year-olds to be running over in their mind. Maybe the most mature adults or young adults would be those that maybe have been exposed to trauma or poverty that really, like, my survival depends on it. And even then, which is definitely not wrong, young adults are focused on surviving, getting a job, to get to a better financial economic scale, to be get more exposure to resources, and maybe even perhaps to support family members. But that's still not speaking to mental and emotional health. And these are things, if you look at a lot of popular cults, you'll quite often find young people that were on their way to college. You can also find adult college graduates. You can find old adults with lots of resources, houses and cars and everything. They give all of that to the cult and the cult leader. So that says, although folks may be accomplished and can pay rent and can make earn money, that there's still a void inside, and that is something that is definitely and easily manipulated. So a cult person or leader or manipulator is very, very keen on understanding human needs and desires for validation. So to get certain again on what you can do, what you can and will do to overcome your fear. Again, these are I would say advanced concepts for young people, and to get excited and take action. So to be quite honest, I don't totally know what I could tell a young adult at this point, because the reality is there's so many predators on so many, not just cults. It's also just a mentality, a behavior pattern of basically, and this is not to add more fear mongering, but the reality is there's so many folks out here, organized and non-organized, singular and as a collective group and organizations, to manipulate young people out of some of the best years of their lives And when young people are locked in with anchor babies into something, or even more mature women, when they have depleted their resources, um, and they feel very trapped. So many people are like, well, this is a whole lot better than what I was experiencing before. So one of the things that had me share today, and I have tremendous compassion for the parents of young adults in cults. I sit and reason, quietly before I say anything, like, what is so bothersome? As I watch right now in a cult, um, a young woman, I don't know that her parents, well, they may or may not know by now. I'm watching her siblings already in the cult, and I'm watching her. I know from being in there that she has the clothing of an initiate on. She has the clothing of an initiate. So whether people realize it or not, families can be groomed. She has the clothing of an initiate. So as I've shared before, people, women and members already in the cult are used to bring other family members into a cult and to give smooth passage to a cult leader to move and navigate amongst the community, right? So once you have a front person, as soon as a cult leader arrives in a new space, they look to link with someone, usually the somebody that may be the odd one out, or someone that feels like they're shunned by the community, or maybe having a hard time. These are people, once the cult leader gets their trust, they're used as, I guess, they're the buffer. They become the spokesperson. The cult leader will become like their father figure, and they'll be used as a spokesperson because they feel so proud to belong to something. They'll be used to bring family members and other community members, and they give the thank you, that's right. They give credibility to the cult leader, whereas before, without the buffer or this link, they're usually viewed, and rightfully so, with suspicion, because their movements are not transparent, very secretive, very standoffish, which, in the context, many people have the right to be, but everything is about context. And usually the cult leader controls the narrative and the context. And they're very rhetorical in their communications, and not transparent. So these are patterns. You can note that something doesn't feel right, but without a frame of reference and being newly introduced to a cult in the community, people don't really quite understand what they're looking at. So when I look, it's everyone's right. Grown adults have the right to join into cults. Everyone has a right to do what they want to do. Adult parents cannot control their adult children, and quite often, some adults of or parents of adult children in cults at some point just reason, well, if they had certain issues fitting in, or if they had mental health issues, or if they had physical health issues, that, well, maybe this is better than being on the outside. So it's interesting how the reasoning, and this is where the distinction of public grooming and community grooming. But this one particular cult that I've had experience, I think is sometimes it's just so bothersome to watch. And this has happened before with several other cults, where like a whole community is being groomed without really understanding who they're giving access to, right? Do know, for example, Jim Jones used basketball, actually used basketball to gain entrance and to get access to young men. And you would think, like, who would think of something like that? But if you think of any kind of predator or manipulator, what do they use? Candy. They'll use desires. They use listening to you, being an ear for your dreams or whatever. Um, People may not realize that they're being audited. So as they're sharing personal information about themselves, they're actually giving access to all of these vulnerable spots, which will definitely be used to keep the person inside of a cult. And most other people are so busy living their own lives, they're like, well, if there's a grown person in, so what? But I'm watching the slow, because these manipulators, they have a long-term game plan, and they're very, very patient. They're very, very masterful with words, and they're very, very, very patient. So, as I watched this young girl dancing with the initiate's clothes on. Meanwhile, I know for a fact that this person came in, hated the fact that their sibling was in the cult, and made sure that she told the cult leader. I know that they had a health condition. There's so many layers without revealing personal information. But this, I remember distinctly, this cult leader said, I got your son, and I'm gonna get the rest of your kids too. And see, people take many things for granted. They take so many things, and it turns out that that's exactly what's happening before everyone's eyes. So we're just in a time people don't question if you give somebody a free turkey or free plate of food, or you put on an outfit, or you have great oratory skills, or you have a beard, you can have this presentation, of family. Meanwhile, the average person doesn't ask critical thinking questions. I mean, why would they? You don't know who's who. You don't know who is in there inappropriately. If these parents, I don't know if they'll ever see this, but maybe this will be archived. Maybe most likely they'll try to strike down this channel. But as I'm watching, this person is being groomed to be married into the family. Now everybody knows that that's inside the cult. Maybe at this point the parents realize they don't care, or maybe they figure because if their offspring or their child is sick, that's a better place for them. So there are all these rationalizations and justifications are what are used to keep people inside of these cults. Because I can think of some distinct patterns. Most of the folks, the adults that in there were in life crisis, or were sick or ill. And at that point, when somebody's sick or ill, they'll trade in, quote unquote, anything um, for a sense of feeling safe. Meanwhile, quite often, the cult leader is grossly exaggerating and magnifying fear, right? So that no one ever wants to leave the cult. And when that's done in isolation and dripped in every day, all day, it really starts to wear on people's common sense. And meanwhile, again, I say I have tremendous compassion for the parents of grown adults, adult children, adult offspring in cults, because ultimately they just want their adult children to be okay and mentally stable, and they can't just go and necessarily snatch them out. As well, they don't have a frame of reference for what's going on inside the cult, because if they were to think, the family members, the children, adults will often tell them to mind their own business, right? But it's a long, steady process. But if they were to really sit back and to think, and sometimes even in doing these videos, I'm sure that they watch this channel because it's very, very strategic. If the parents were to think, there's so many questions that they cannot answer, but when you're in a state of panic for your children, that fear becomes your driving motivation, and it's how you start to make your decisions. So eventually, over time, you're groomed and you just give in. So it's a slow, steady process. And when someone has so much concern for their children, they just want their children to be okay. So, you can't see what's going on inside the cult. They're not going to answer your questions. They're grown. You can't tell them what to do. There are things you'll suspect. Some of these saved parents, they said, get out of my child's head. You know, um, they've said they didn't want their child in the cult, but eventually, not only did they just come to acceptance, here's the thing that I think is such a shame. They wind up becoming the advocates for the cult. That's what I think is so bothersome. That's what is so bothersome. That again, they become the buffer and the gateway. I'm trying to think of the name of the cult. I don't know if it was Osho's cult back in the day. If people look at the documentary on it, that wound up almost taking over a whole community that was already established. It's like, wow. So these are things that we take for granted. And do understand that many people will prefer the cult and to feel better over personal responsibility, or to deal with the discomfort of considering of fears. And the cult leader will take and exacerbate and magnify fears that we have about life. And so, who is qualified to control us or to manipulate us? Who do we give who do we give leeway and permission to make decisions for us? To We give permission to manipulate us. You can hear out of many cult members' mouths, I need to be brainwashed. This is usually something that's introduced. Like, I'm so thankful to be brainwashed. I've heard it in the cult that I had experience with, and it's a pattern. I've heard it in other cults, right? So this is a frame of reference. While I know uh, many Afro peoples, and we're not the only one, um, our symbolism and our stories, especially of people traumatized, are very, very important to us. Um, to use aspects of our culture to give us definition and values, and to reclaim a lot of our esteem. The symbols are very, very important, but not but it's for us to understand that those same symbols can be used to manipulate you. Elements of truth can be used to manipulate you. Desires that you have, although they may be uh, good or well-intentioned desires, your desires can be used to manipulate you. For example, you want a family so bad, you want to be loved so bad, it's striking a chord within you. A manipulator is going to show you what you desire. And so your desires and your fears are used to manipulate you. So I come and I share, because I do realize many may not have a frame of reference when you're under already a lot of stress from basic life and bills and responsibilities, and then to have adult children. Because I can definitely tell you, as a mother, you never stop thinking about your children. And then many moms and maybe fathers that introduce our children to cults, thinking that we're doing something, the right thing, introducing them to values. I mean, and share, again, this is how women especially can be manipulated, because whatever the mother's doing or eating, whatever she feels is valuable, women inherently will come and introduce that to the rest of the community and the family. And sometimes, even with the best of intentions, we're bringing stuff in. We're bringing stuff in without a thorough. So I would say a important distinction is a thorough vetting process. So no matter how much we may like the rhetoric or the words or the outfit or the appeal of something, it is definitely time for us to establish a thorough vetting process. And a thorough vetting process would include asking uncomfortable questions, and not only looking for information online, sometimes that we may feel that's the best we can do, but cross-referencing character, and doing a thorough, looking at both sides, not just looking for um, praise about a person, a cult leader, or a minister, or rabbi, a politician. Looking to see, there's any. It's like if you were researching a product. I mean, this is your life is much more precious than a product. You would look to see what the reviews are before you invest your money, right? All these people gave it 5 stars, but we know many people are paid now to give reviews on products, right, on Amazon. So the people that actually take pictures of their broken products, or tell you about the customer service, if before you plunk down a sizable investment, it would make sense to do a thorough vetting process, consumer reviews. Is this a company that is open, that's just going to close down and disappear? If we do that for a product, why don't we do that for ourselves? So group grooming and turning a blind eye because of our desires. Again, even if they're well intentioned, for what we want to see, something that we want to be real, or our vision for utopia, or our vision of heaven. We want it to be real so bad that we will turn a blind eye to what is actually happening before us. So I'll just move forward with saying, just there's some patterns to see. Do know with the particular cult that I experienced, there's some patterns. The music is all out of tune. The books are repetitive, pretty much the same thing. They flip it several ways. It's saying the same thing, but the music is all out of tune. You don't know folks real names who they're dealing with. You don't know the folks that have come and left. um, and because of our love for symbolism in our culture, quite often we're what I see in the comments, people, yes, but, and I was one of those people. Yes, Baba. Look at this ancestor. Not blind because I thought from what I saw from the outside. You see children, you see women, you see healthy foods, or the image of healthy foods. You don't know who in is unhealthy, right? You don't know the hazing process that people go through. You don't know who's tried to, the cult members, the steady ones, how many times they've tried to leave. You don't know the inappropriate matches. You don't know who's being initiated. You haven't had personal experience, but because you see symbols and you see red, gold, and green, or you see locks, you start vouching for these people as if you know them, and you do not know these people on the internet. So I encourage people to trust your common sense. You're invited to trust your common sense more than you trust an online personality, more than you trust a politician, more than you trust your boyfriend or your spouse, more than you trust anybody, because all of us were born inherently with common sense, and due to trauma being inflicted on us, sometimes as an individual, sometimes as a collective, it starts to make us question and doubt ourselves, right? Do we see what we really see? Something doesn't feel right, but somebody tells us something with some words that sound really smooth, and we start to second guess ourselves, and that becomes habitual. So hopefully this is helpful for folks. Know the music is all out of tune. You don't know who you're looking at and who's who. You don't know their real names. You don't know who's doing what inappropriately with who at what age. And right now I'm watching a community be groomed through basketball under the guise of health food. The healthful fruits and vegetables are healthy, but you don't know who in there is sick. You don't know. You don't know these people. And if you were to ask questions and you were to do your research, you will find nothing is answered directly. It's all rhetorical. And a lot of the information that these folks have, you have access to. You really don't need a personality to tell you to eat more fruits and vegetables. And many of us will put this on a leader outside of ourselves, and that's one of the reasons why we get got. So you're invited to, take the plunge and recalibrate, and listen to your own common sense. Cultivate a trust for yourself, even though you don't know everything. You may not know everything about gardening. You may not know everything about fruits and vegetables, but you have access to the same information that these so-called leaders and high priests, which is another red flag to me. And I'm saying based on experience. I could care less what people call themselves. If your character is on point. But a lot of things you will not find out until you are thoroughly hazed and broken inside the cult. The average person who has not experienced the cult does not have a frame of reference. But meanwhile, we're championing, and getting behind these so-called leaders because their words sound good. So at what point do people just take on a personal responsibility and stop running so hard for people? I may be able to say this I've experienced with you, but I can't fully vouch for your character. I haven't lived with you. We have a habit of vouching for people's character who you have not lived with. So perhaps you can vouch for them to a point of your experience with them. But somebody shows us some symbolism and some pictures that we like, and speaks in a tone that we like, and we drop all of our very important barriers and protections of common sense and discernment. All right, folks, keep your thinking caps on and create a great day on purpose.